It was such a life-changing event around here. Everybody measured their life by, was it before or after Camille?
I haven't heard of a more severe storm in the United States.
You could hear the wind howling, glass breaking in windows. It was like a war zone.
The water came. It came so fast. It was like a wave that just came and took everything.
That night, I genuinely thought that I had died and that I was in my own type of hell.
All I can remember is my sisters saying, "Lord, forgive me." It haunts me every day.
From the Weather Channel, this is Storm Stories with meteorologist Jim Cantori.
If you live along the Mississippi Gulf Coast, you're no stranger to hurricanes. Betsy, Elena, and of course, Katrina.
From 1717 until today, we have had 33 strike the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
But long before Katrina shed a spotlight on this battered shore, there was Hurricane Camille. A hurricane so fierce, locals doubted a hurricane could ever be worse.
Before Hurricane Katrina came, there was a BC and an AC. Everybody measured their life by, was it before or after Camille? Because it was such a life-changing event around here.
More than 40 years later, they still have a lot to say about Camille and why living on the Mississippi Gulf Coast is worth a hurricane or two.
It's the price you pay to live in paradise.
The towns along this 80-mile stretch of coast were havens for wealthy city folk. Pass Christian, population 5,000, is one of them.
Pass Christian has always been quiet and beautiful from the beginning. It began as a summer place for the rich of New Orleans and Mobile, who built those gorgeous homes along Scenic Drive.
At one time, Scenic Drive was the third wealthiest address in the country. But in Pass Christian, life was good no matter where you lived.
We used to play on the beach and fish, shrimp, crab, flounder at night, and stay out there about 10, 12 hours a day.
And you went out our front yard, you crossed Highway 90 and walked out on the sand and walked out on the water. I mean, we grew up right there. It's wonderful.
Everyone looked out for each other. We would play ball, go out on the beach swimming.
But on August 17, 1969, the easy living comes to a screeching halt.
I haven't heard of a more severe storm in the United States.
A hurricane watch is issued that weekend for the Gulf Coast. But at first, forecasters predict Florida will get the brunt of the severe weather. By Sunday, they realize Hurricane Camille's eye wall will pass over Mississippi, not Florida. They begin urging Mississippi residents to evacuate.
We're at the point now where all we can do is cross our fingers and pray.
Most Pass Christian residents leave town. Among them are Billy Bourdine's wife and 4 children.
She packed up and hauled it, kids and all, let me alone.
Along with running the family plumbing business, Billy is a volunteer fireman. He stays behind to help the town prepare.
We started trying to get people out of the lower places around here, which is close to impossible. They don't want to hear you. I went down and helped them get the boats out the harbor.
Some residents put off leaving until they've battened down the hatches.
We got up that morning of the storm and boarded all the windows on the ground level, moved furniture to the upper floors.
Mississippi native Ben Duckworth lives in Pass Christian's Richelieu Apartments. The 5-year-old complex offers residents sand and surf, starting at $120 a month.
I found the Richelieu and fell in love with it. Its setting, it's had such a dramatic view of the beach and the Gulf.
Ben plans to evacuate north to his parents' house in Jackson, but he spends the afternoon helping police move cars to higher ground. When he finally returns to the Richelieu at 4 p.m., he runs into some elderly neighbors.
I bumped into the Matthews. Mrs. Matthews broken her hip early in the year. Mr. Matthews said, "If you and some of the others are going to stay, would you watch after me and my wife?"
As rain begins pounding down, Ben decides to ride out the hurricane at the Richelieu with the Matthews and a handful of neighbors. His landlord invites them to spend the night in an empty top-floor apartment.
We thought we'd have dinner together in that third-floor apartment. We were exhausted. I know I was. And plans were just to have a quiet evening.
A few blocks from the Richelieu sits Trinity Episcopal Church. It's where 18-year-old Malcolm Williams and his family gather for the hurricane. Malcolm is one of 15 children, 6 girls, 9 boys.
We was a close, loving family. You can imagine 9 boys, you know, that's like having an already made baseball team.
Their father, Paul, is the church custodian, and Malcolm and his siblings often take shelter at Trinity during hurricane season. Tonight, 11 of the Williams children head there, along with Malcolm's parents, brother-in-law, niece, and nephew.
My father had a truck. It took him about at least 2 to 3 times to bring us all there. We took a lot of blankets and pillows and clothing, water, and a little food.
Over at 706 East Beach Boulevard, Jim Simpson and his family are also preparing for the hurricane. Jim is just 14, but he's no stranger to hurricanes. He even looks forward to them.
Several families would usually get together and spend the night, kind of ride out the storm, so to speak. And you know, the electricity goes out, something like that. But everybody gets together, and this one brought sandwiches, somebody brought potato salad, you have gas lanterns, people play cards.
The Simpson family has lived in Pass Christian for nearly a century, running a seafood business and serving in local politics. Jim's father, James Simpson Sr., represents Pass Christian in the state legislature.
As a kid, you grow up being careful. You don't want to get in trouble because your dad's going to hear about it.
2 generations of Simpsons have grown up in the same 3-story antebellum house on Beach Boulevard. Jim's grandmother still lives there with them. Tonight, they must convince her to evacuate.
It wasn't a decision about there might be danger, and she wasn't worried about staying home. I mean, this house had been there for 100 years. It would withstand anything. She just said, I don't want to go, I'm tired. And Mom and Dad convinced her, nah, come on, the whole family will be there, the group will be there, it'll be fun, you'll enjoy it. And so she finally relented and agreed to go.
The Simpsons drive a few miles inland to the home of family friends. Just in time. The rising tide swallows the beach, then submerges their street. The wind blows upward of 100 miles an hour, then 120, then 150, with no signs of quitting.
Around maybe 7:30, I heard something beating up against the church. I didn't know what it was, and my father said, son, don't worry about it. He didn't really realize that the water was rising.
And rising on 2 fronts. Pass Christian sits on a peninsula. To the south is the Gulf of Mexico. To the north and west is St. Louis Bay. Hurricane Camille's surge pushes water from the Gulf into the shallow bay, where it overflows. Inside the church, Malcolm, his father, and his brother-in-law help their 13 family members climb a partial ladder to the attic. Malcolm is about to join them up there when the unthinkable happens.
The water came. It came so fast to where we couldn't get up on the ladder to get in the attic.
Malcolm clings to a beam, then watches in horror as the structure begins collapsing into the rising water.
It was like a wave that just came and took everything. You could hear boards, you could hear the building fixing to explode. I remember going underwater, and then all of a sudden, everything just went. All I can remember is my sisters saying, Lord, forgive me. And it took my breath away.
It's just after 11 p.m. and Hurricane Camille is hammering the Mississippi coastline. In the town of Pass Christian, The Gulf purges water 4 blocks inland. Wind screeches toward 200 miles an hour, and the eye's landfall is still 45 minutes away. 18-year-old Malcolm Williams and 15 members of his family have taken refuge in Trinity Episcopal Church when it collapses. Floodwater envelops the church and everything inside it, including Malcolm and his family.
I remember going underwater because the building was starting to do this. All of a sudden, everything just went. I remember hearing some of my sisters and brothers screaming, hollering. It haunts me every day.
But the rising water snuffs out their voices. In moments, the 150-year-old building is gutted. Without the church to shelter him, Malcolm is at the mercy of the elements. He has no idea whether his parents or siblings are crushed in the collapse or, like him, now struggle to stay afloat in the floodwater.
As I was in the water, I felt this tree. So I just climbed up on it. It was like being on a boat. It all happened so fast.
On the top floor of the Richelieu apartment building a few miles away, Ben Duckworth and 7 neighbors sit anxiously in the dark.
You could hear the wind howling, glass breaking in windows. It was like a war zone.
Ben steps out to the building's enclosed walkway to assess the danger.
I looked down into the stairwell, took my flashlight and shined it down there. I saw the reflection back. And then I realized we had level water a foot below the 3rd floor slab.
Ben returns to the apartment where a neighbor asks for an update.
I think in my mind I knew that something bad was fixing to happen. And I was telling her that I thought we'd be okay. When it was just like a moan, and the building, you could just imperceptible tremor went through the building. And then I realized water was coming to the apartment.
What Ben and his friends don't realize is that the flood surge has swept the building off its foundation. The Richelieu is sinking fast, and the only way out is up. A split appears in the apartment ceiling. Standing on furniture, Ben and a friend tear sheetrock away from the crack. They manage to create a gap big enough to escape.
People started coming up out of the apartment through the ceiling. And as you come up through the hole in the roof, they were instantly gone into the darkness. Naturally, when I stuck my head up through the hole in the roof, the glasses were the first thing to go. So I was blind. It was so dark. There was so much debris in the water. You just went with the water. You had no other choice.
6 others scramble up to the roof of the Richelieu building. Within a few moments, each one is plucked up and carried off by the current. Only 3 survive. The water slams Ben into an oak tree, and like Malcolm Williams, Ben grabs hold of it, trying to keep his head above water.
I dug in. The only way you could breathe in that wind was to force my nose up into the bark of the tree, because if I took my face away from the tree, it just sucked the air out of you. And so I put my face up into the tree and was sometimes underwater, sometimes above water.
Overhead, Camille's eye passes over the neighboring town of Bay St. Louis, 7 miles away.
And then I remembered that the direction that I was swinging in the tree changed abruptly. And that was, I think, when the eye passed.
The force of the hurricane strips Ben's shirt and shoes right off his body. For the next 5 hours, the tree is all that separates him from the elements.
That night, I genuinely thought that I had died and that I was in my own type of hell. And I just imagined that this is the way I was going to spend eternity. And I thought about the others. I wondered, why am I here and they're not?
All night, Hurricane Camille holds Pass Christian under siege. When dawn approaches, it finally leaves town. Floodwater from the 24-foot hurricane surge recedes, revealing the crushing extent of destruction.
After Camille, 68 square miles were totally destroyed on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. The bombing of Hiroshima destroyed 3 square miles total. So look at the magnitude of this thing. The comparisons between atomic bombings and these storms is appropriate. I mean, that's what it looks like.
Overnight, Camille has claimed the lives of 132 people. 13 of them are named Williams. Up in the tree where he's balanced, Malcolm Williams wonders if anyone in Pass Christian survived the hurricane. The sound of voices suddenly rouses him from shock.
I heard 2 people calling out. That gave me a little hope that someone survived, but I didn't really think that it was, my family.
One of Malcolm's cousins, who is out looking for members of the Williams family, finds him.
You ever seen a cat get on a tree and cling to it? That's how he found me.
Malcolm's cousin helps him to the makeshift hospital set up at Pass Christian High School. Not until the next day does he learn that though his mother and 10 of his siblings perished in the night, his father and brother-in-law survived. In fact, the morning after Camille, Malcolm's father stumbles upon Ben Duckworth, wrapped around an oak tree. Ben is so traumatized, at first he thinks Paul Williams is a hallucination.
I just thought tricks were being played on me. And until I realized that there was a man standing down at the base of that tree, that's the first time I knew that I was alive.
It's a sweltering morning in Mississippi, 1969. Overnight, Hurricane Camille has decimated the Gulf Coast. Residents like Jim Simpson are coming to grips with the astonishing loss.
It was very difficult to find your home because the landmarks are gone. And it's not like just walking down the street at a comfortable pace, but it's climbing over upside down cars and through piles of brush and trees that are pushed over.
14-year-old Jim and his family live on the beach, but they have spent the night further inland. Now he and his sister return home to survey the damage.
We were thinking, this is so bad. We're gonna go back and it's gonna be a mess. There's gonna be water and tree limbs and broken glass.
But the reality is far worse.
In our wildest dreams, we had no idea that everything we owned would be gone. What was left of our home was a shell.
Jim's grandmother resisted leaving the house the previous evening. Moving inland saved her life, but it is cold comfort.
She was devastated because she'd raised her children in that home. It's everything that ever mattered to her, and it was just all lost, and it was a terrible, terrible blow for her.
The Simpson family is homeless, but Jim's father, a state representative, is too busy focusing on the town's cleanup efforts to wallow in personal loss. The coast is without power and phone service, and its roads are washed out, blocking truckloads of water and emergency supplies. Until relief groups can arrive, the work of cleaning up Pass Christian falls to its residents.
In the days after, you need water, and you need soap, you need garbage bags. I mean, you need the most basic, immediate necessities of life. It wasn't running water, so daily we had to go to an artesian well and fill up these big water bags. You want to complain about it till you get there, and everybody's doing it, so it's the new normal.
Since communication lines are down, some news reports about Hurricane Camille are inaccurate. According to one, Ben Duckworth and his Richelieu apartment neighbors ignored evacuation warnings so they could throw a drunken hurricane party, like the one depicted in this 1971 documentary.
Excuse me. Hi, pal. Come in. Welcome to the hurricane party.
Ben's own parents hear this hurricane party story on TV the day after Camille. Unable to reach their son by phone, they spend the next 2 days making funeral arrangements.
And so Dad made plans to come down the following morning, and he was told that there were bodies being kept in morgues there in the Gulf Coast area, and that if he wanted to get my body out of the morgue, that he needed to take some cash, because nobody was taking checks.
Fortunately, Ben is reunited with his family within 48 hours. But the story of the infamous Richelieu Apartments hurricane party still circulates 40 years later.
I tried to get the story out that there was no party. There was more praying than there was partying, but the story persists today.
When Hurricane Camille ravaged the Mississippi Gulf Coast in 1969, survivors took comfort in thinking they had seen the worst hurricane in their lifetime. Tragically, Hurricane Katrina proved them wrong.
Camille destroyed a lot of past Christian. Katrina completed the job.
Like his father, Jim Simpson becomes a Mississippi legislator. And like his father, a hurricane, Katrina, destroys his home and devastates his community.
I was elected in '94, and I was there 11 years when the storm hit. To think about, oh my gosh, this is the same thing that happened to Dad. 2005 and 1969 were worlds apart, but it's still the same thing. People looking for ways to find a life again, trying to make a new normal.
For the Weather Channel, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori. Your local forecast is next.